These winter horror stories all took place during the cold months of the season, making them even more horrifying. The Death Bus, a college student's terrifying encounter with mysterious passengers. First off, I need to make it clear that this story is based on my own experiences. There's nothing I've heard from others or made up. It's all real. Some parts might seem so unbelievable that even I would doubt them if I hadn't experienced them myself. So if there are any doubts, let's discuss, but please, no anger. I'm just an ordinary person, not some mystical figure, so each story I tell is one I've lived through. They might not be as thrilling as the novels you find online, and updates might be slow. After all, for me, each story represents a life or death decision. Lastly, I'm still alive, which means I'll keep updating this thread. I can't say when exactly, as encountering ghosts isn't something I can predict, nor do I know when I might not return. Enough preamble, let's dive into the main story. Today's tale is titled The Death Bus. This happened several years ago in a small town. I was in college, and the new semester was about to start. I was getting my luggage ready to return to school. On the night before my departure, my friends threw a farewell party for me, and we drank until late into the night. After parting ways with them, I found myself walking alone on the deserted streets, wondering why it was so cold and why there was no one around. I expected at least some traffic. Lost in these thoughts, I continued walking and passed by the bus station. Noticing that the lights in the waiting room were still on, I remembered that I hadn't bought my bus ticket yet. Since it was my last day and there seemed to be someone still there, I decided to buy it to avoid trouble the next day. As I entered the waiting room, I noticed the dim lighting. Why's the station so stingy with the lights? I thought, but shrugged it off and headed to the ticket counter. The woman behind the counter had long hair, but her face was obscured by the dim light. I jokingly imagined she must be attractive, paid for my ticket to the state capitol for 6:30 a.m. the next morning, and went home. That night I had a bizarre dream. I dreamt I was at the bus station, ready to board, but the bus in my dream exuded a strange aura. Standing beside it with my luggage, I felt something was off. Suddenly, I looked up and saw the bus's wheels pointing skyward. How did they get on top of the bus? And why was the roof emitting black smoke? Just then, an unseen force tried to pull me onto the bus, but I resisted. The struggle continued until my dad woke me up. It was 5 a.m., and while it's unusual to remember a dream from the night before so vividly, this one stayed clear in my mind. Yet I didn't think much of it and headed to the station with my dad. Arriving at the station, it seemed deserted except for us. I pushed the door open, passed through the waiting area, and made my way to the parking lot. A solitary bus was parked there. Something about it felt ominous, but I couldn't pinpoint what. With a sense of unease, I stored my luggage and boarded the bus with my dad. As I stepped on, I was struck by how cold it felt, not a physical cold, but more like a chill emanating from within. The dim lights in the aisle barely illuminated the faces of the passengers, elderly people on the left and young men and women on the right. The bus was nearly full, just 2 seats remaining. I found it odd how the seating seemed segregated by age. Nevertheless, I took a seat on the right, preparing to wave goodbye to my dad, when the memory of my dream hit me. A deep fear surged within me, and suddenly I found myself unable to move. Panicked, I remembered a scene from Harry Potter where a character overcomes fear-induced paralysis by inflicting pain on themselves. Lacking a better option, I fished out a compass from my backpack and jabbed it into my thigh. The pain was enough to get me moving. I grabbed my luggage and bolted off the bus. As I was leaving, a pair of young boys boarded. Something about them seemed off, but I couldn't quite place it. The bus door shut behind them and slowly drove off. My dad asked what was wrong, but I couldn't explain and just told him I got on the wrong bus. We tried to return to the waiting room to stay warm, but found all the doors locked, a confusing and unnerving discovery. We eventually made our way to the station's main entrance, only to find it locked as well. Puzzled and without options, we sat on the steps until daylight. The sound of doors opening startled us. We stood up, ready to confront the staff, only to be greeted by two security guards. Before I could speak, they brandished their batons and accused us of being thieves. Thieves? My dad and I were dumbfounded. The guards took us to the security office, and after some back and forth, they called the police. Soon, the station manager arrived. I explained everything, showing my ticket as proof. The manager confirmed it was a valid ticket from the station, but insisted no one was working the previous night. Just then, my uncle, who was the chief of police, arrived. He listened to our story and suggested letting us go, as there was no evidence of wrongdoing, and he vouched for us. With no further objections, we were released. My dad invited my uncle over for lunch later that day, a decision that seemed trivial at the time. However, what happened next firmly anchored this event in the realm of the supernatural. During lunch, my uncle casually mentioned how busy he'd been with an unusual number of deaths recently, all with seemingly natural causes, yet strangely coincidental. This sparked a realization about the two boys who boarded the bus. They had no shadows and seemed to float rather than walk. I blurted out that there had been 28 deaths, half elderly, the last two being young boys reported that morning. My uncle's gaze fixed on me, demanding to know how I knew such specific details. I explained everything, from my dream to the encounter at the station, and our bewildered silence filled the room. Later, I learned my uncle had persuaded the local government to build a new bus station, citing security concerns due to high foot traffic in the old area. The old station was demolished, and a temple was erected in its place, serving as a community center for the elderly. Curious, I asked my uncle about his report. He replied, "What could I have written? The truth. Even if the higher-ups believed it, it would only cause more trouble." I had no response, just a deep sense of unease about the mysterious and unexplainable events that had transpired. As the days passed, the incident at the bus station began to feel like a distant, if not unsettling, memory. Life resumed its usual pace, but the shadow of that eerie morning lingered in the back of my mind. One evening, while studying in my dorm, I received a call from my dad. His voice was tense, and he asked if I remembered the strange events surrounding the bus station. Before I could respond, he told me something that sent a chill down my spine. The bus I had almost boarded that fateful morning was found in a ravine outside the town. It had crashed under mysterious circumstances, and all the passengers on board were found dead. I was speechless. The reality of what could have been my fate had I stayed on that bus weighed heavily on me. My father continued, explaining that the investigation into the crash revealed no mechanical faults or driver errors. It was as if the bus had been driven off the road by an unseen force. The news spread quickly throughout the town, and rumors began to circulate. Some said the bus was cursed. Others believed it was an act of vengeance by restless spirits. The townsfolk, who had once dismissed the supernatural, now whispered in hushed tones about the unexplainable tragedy. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. It was as if the ghostly passengers of that ill-fated bus were reaching out from beyond, a reminder of the narrow escape I had from joining them in their eternal journey. The experience left an indelible mark on me. I became more cautious, more aware of the thin veil that separates the living from the spectral world. The mundane reality of everyday life was now interspersed with a heightened sense of the unknown, the unexplained. As I share this story, I wonder about the fate of those lost souls on the death bus. Were they just unfortunate victims of a tragic accident, or were they part of something far more sinister, a mystery that defies explanation? The truth remains shrouded in the shadows of that fateful day, a chilling reminder of the thin line between life and death. And so my story ends here, but the journey through the unknown continues. As long as I live, I'll keep seeking answers, venturing into the shadows in search of the truth that lurks within. The Phantom of the New York Subway. In early 2007, I received a call from a friend in need of urgent financial help. I agreed to lend him $20,000 and decided to deliver the cash by taking the New York subway the next morning. I woke up early and caught the first subway of the day, a nearly empty R train rumbling through the quiet stations. It was a Sunday, and the city was still asleep. At the empty carriage, I was joined by a girl in a red jacket, around 17 or 18, with delicate features. She seemed startled by the emptiness and hesitated, but the doors had already closed. She moved closer to me, looping her arm through mine. Her hands were stunningly beautiful, slender and almost translucent. My heart raced. Was this my lucky break in love? The girl leaned close and whispered, "Are you not scared?" "Scared of what?" I asked. "The carriage is full of ghosts," she claimed. I tried to dismiss her claim humorously, suggesting she was trying to trick me, but she insisted, handing me a pair of pink glasses. Reluctantly, I put them on, and was horrified to see the carriage indeed appeared full of ghostly figures, silent and pale. I was stunned. How did we switch from the R line to the A line without noticing? The girl snuggled closer for warmth, and I found comfort in her presence despite the eerie situation. As we approached 50th Street, the announcement for 59th Street, Columbus Circle Station, came, and the ghostly passengers began to orderly exit the train. I shook hands with the little boy, his hand ice-cold, sending a chill down my spine. Left alone with the girl, I felt a strange connection. But as we exited the subway, she thanked me and walked away, leaving me with a mix of emotions and unanswered questions. I reached my friend's house and recounted the event. He laughed. explaining that the pink glasses were a popular novelty item that created illusions. But as I checked my pocket, I realized my $20,000 was gone, a costly lesson on the New York subway. Shaken by the disappearance of the girl and my money, I found myself in a daze as I wandered the streets of New York. The city, normally so familiar, felt alien and surreal. I couldn't shake the image of the ghostly passengers and the haunting, empty gaze of the little boy. Dave decided to report the incident to the NYPD, hoping to at least recover my lost funds. The officer listened to my story with a mix of skepticism and amusement. "Ghosts on the subway, huh? That's a new one," he chuckled. I left the station feeling foolish and defeated. Days passed, and the memory of the red-jacketed girl haunted my thoughts. I retraced my steps, riding the same subway line at the same hour, half hoping, half fearing to encounter her or the phantoms again. But the trains were always crowded with the living, the ghostly apparitions nowhere to be seen. Then, one evening, I saw her again. She was standing on the platform of the 59th Street, Columbus Circle station, still wearing that red jacket. Our eyes met, and she smiled. A knowing, enigmatic smile. Before I could approach her, she stepped onto an arriving train and disappeared into the crowd. I never saw her again. The mystery of the girl in the red jacket and the phantom-filled subway carriage remained unsolved, a bizarre chapter in my life that I could never fully explain. It left me with a lingering sense of the uncanny, a reminder of the mysteries and unexpected turns life can take in the heart of a city like New York.